Hey everybody, how's it going today? So coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin, up here for the Acres USA conference for the next couple days, and hanging out in the room for a minute here. Thought I'd jump on and do a quick video, um, do a little politics today. Let's say a lot of discussion, conversation, speculation, fear and loathing in the agricultural space on the USDA and the new administration. There was all this speculation within a few days after the election on who might be the new Secretary of Agriculture. There was this movement to have it be Thomas Massey, and Joel Salatin, had a blog about that, and then there was speculation about it being um, Loeffner from Georgia. Ended up not being her, and ends up being Brooke Rollins. And so wanted to talk a little bit about her, what I know so far. That seems to be the biggest thing, is no one really knows. But I think we can start to put together some of her background, what the Trump administration did in its previous 4 years, 2016 to 2020, and start to put together what this might look like for the next 4 years from a regulatory side from the USDA, and what that might mean for us as agricultural producers and direct to retail kind of people. So let's go over real quick a couple different articles and then something on Twitter that caught my attention. So let's look a little bit here from the Hill, saying that President-elect Trump has tapped Brooke Rollins, a former White House aide in his first administration, to head the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And from his statement, it's saying Brooks' commitment to support the American farmer, defense of American food self-sufficiency, and the restoration of agriculture-dependent American small towns is second to none. So that's kind of implying a couple things there of strengthening an agricultural sector, American food self-sufficiency. That's kind of a little tell there to the pending tariff and trade war, and then just general support for the American farm. And it goes on with kind of some of her background there. And then she will be filling in, or taking the spot vacated by Tom Vilsack, who did the last 4 years, also did 8 years during the Obama administration, and a very let's just say good old boys club kind of guy in big ag. And then so was Trump's first Secretary of Ag, Sonny Perdue. So track record is going to show maybe this is a little bit more of business as normal. Rollins spent the last 4 years at the helm of the American First Policy Institute, a nonprofit group launched by former Trump administration officials and focused on advancing Trump's first-term agenda after he lost the re-election bid. A bunch of fundraising that was done, a lot of lobbying, kind of that groundwork type of activities, and this does come as somewhat of a surprise pick. So I also went back and let's take a look at what happened during Trump's first administration on the agricultural side. Very I'd say corporate oriented, big farm types of policies, but the trade war really caused some problems on the agricultural sector. So I pulled up an article here from Civil Leads, which it's a very left-leaning type of organization and website, but I think has some good things to say here. How 4 years of Trump reshaped food and farming. So ag economy here. Farmers, especially commodity farmers here, quote, overwhelmingly supported Trump over Clinton in the 2016 election. Since then, U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue has been one of the president's most vocal advocates, so much that he was fined for violating the Hatch Act. And that seems to be par for the course for politicians in D.C. to cross legal lines. Now, if you remember, right after Trump was elected, a trade war with China was undertaken, and then China retaliates against that. Looking at today, China is already starting to retaliate for what they expect is going to happen, already putting a ban on rare earth minerals export to the United States. So we could be in for even a more heated version of a trade war with China, and possibly our more closer trading partners of Mexico and Canada. Going back to the article here, between 2017 and 2018, U.S. exports of agricultural products to China decreased by 63%, from 15.8 billion to 5.9. So this is pre-pandemic. This is also, if you remember, at the same time, China is going through ASF, African swine fever. 100 million dead pigs in China. You would think they'd be importing, as much as possible, but that was not the case. That cut that, by 2/3 almost. And then in 2018, USDA began distributing cash payments through the Commodity Credit Corporation. You're just dumping money into the commodity level type production guys. And then, of course, once COVID hit, the USDA was handing out money to farmers like crazy to try to keep everything going. So, what are the effects of getting into a agricultural trade war with China? It compounds the effect that overproduction in the United States already experiences. That's, for me, looking at things over the years, the biggest issue that American agriculture has right now is it produces too much. It's a scenario of overproduction that drives prices down. And when you have a major trade partner like China, stop buying stuff from you, that compounds the stuff piling up, pushing prices even further down. One other article I wanted to look at, and then we'll check in on something here on Twitter, kind of give you my final thoughts. That was wrapping up with civil eats there. Over here, this is where it really starts to tie in. Actually, go over here to Twitter first, pull up her Twitter profile. So this is her pinned tweet from the day that she was nominated. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to serve as the next U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. It will be the honor of my life to fight for American farmers and our nation's agricultural communities. This is big stuff for a small town ag girl. She grew up on a farm, FFA, 4-H, has show cattle. So, at least she operates a little bit in the farming space from what we know. But this tweet that she retweeted yesterday from Vivek is kind of telling. And so she just retweets it saying this American flag. And so what Vivek is saying, talking about the Chevron deference overturn in the Supreme Court. And, if you remember back in the summer, massive case, I guess, that the Supreme Court overturned a lot of legal precedents on this thing called the Chevron deference, which essentially meant that courts deferred to agency interpretations of law. Real nerdy kind of stuff. But, essentially, if you look at any legislation that Congress passes, say on agricultural stuff, it'll be a very vague kind of block of text about, let's say, meat processing or dairy or what have you. These agencies that are then taking that law, interpreting it into actual policy and guidelines for farmers or an industry to follow. Agencies are prone to way overstep the congressional mandate that has been given them, and that is a problem. But the Supreme Court walked all of that back. So Vivek is tweeting about that, saying the Supreme Court this year overturned Chevron deference in its Looper Bright ruling, which deals a seismic blow to federal bureaucracy. Under the old standard, federal courts deferred to agency interpretations of law when a statute was deemed ambiguous. A lot of statutes are ambiguous. Okay, that's no longer the case. And here's some facts on the scope of its impact. Lower federal courts relied on the Chevron deference, somewhere between 17 and 19,000 judicial opinions. So all those are now in question, potentially being tossed out. And he goes through some other stuff here, but obviously he's very much in favor of this move by the Supreme Court, which essentially has a declawing effect on federal agencies, that they're, legally in a very gray area or, thin ice, coming up with policies and procedures that exceed their congressional mandate and, the strict verbiage that's used in those laws. And so, she's retweeting this and saying this. So to me, kind of putting all of this together, she has not talked at all about what ag policy is going to be in the years, moving forward, the next 4 years. There really hasn't been anything from Trump either on what ag policy will be. But I think we can put a couple things together that the administration is going to have a very protectionist policy And with trade tariffs, what they're going to end up, we're threatening 50% here, 100% there. That's all just posturing to get something that's probably going to be lower in a compromise with Congress on stuff. But we're looking at a potential tariff/trade war that similar to what went on 16 through 20, and even the Biden administration kept some of that moving forward. So it's not entirely a Republican thing. That is going to likely have an effect of driving prices down for commodities because of a glut slash oversupply of them piling up. As we saw during the first Trump administration, the Chinese had no problem in basically cutting their imports from us, by 60 or over 60%, and just saying, yeah, screw you guys, we're going to go get our product from somewhere else. China is also, in a long-term campaign with their Belt and Road Initiative of developing different supply bases for their food. China relies on a very high percentage of their food to be brought in. Well over 50% of their food has to come from outside the country. They do not have the agricultural base to produce their own. They haven't been happy relying on the United States. And so they are working Africa, South America, Australia, other places to get their imports of food if they end up not wanting to get it from us. So let's just work that back, that if we're not sending all of these exports to China, setting aside the whole discussion of should we even be doing that, that's a whole nother video or series of videos. But the reality is, if we get into another big trade war with them, that all gets rolled back. The American commodity producers are going to be really piling up on stuff like corn, soybeans, pork, maybe poultry that can be adjusted quickly. Beef, I don't think that'll be as much of a problem because the national herd is drawn down so much right now. We probably could use a break on exports to help that herd rebuild. But that's going to have a push down effect on commodity prices. So for the American commodity farmer, the next 4 years might be a rough ride. The other side of this is on that regulatory side, going back to Vivek's tweet and Brooke Rollins' retweet of that. Are we going to be seeing some kind of massive regulatory rollback on the oversight the USDA has on the various things they do, combining that with the creation of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which Vivek would be part of, and Elon Musk, which is not an actual department, but it's an adjacent group, not government employees, that will basically be auditing government departments and seeing where things can be cut. So are we going to see some kind of cutback of USDA budgets? Remember, 80% of the USDA's budgets is SNAP/food stamps, not agricultural support, to producers. So is there going to be a lot of cuts in that area for subsidies, SNAP benefits, et cetera? So is that going to have an effect? On the regulatory side, to me, this might be an area of concern that, yes, there is issues with regulatory overstepping by the USDA, but do we want to absolutely abandon the hen house? What I'm would be concerned about is, are we going to roll back regulations on safety and inspection on large processors that are already pushing for USDA inspectors not to be there anyway, and have their own inspectors who are inspecting these carcasses, and then enforcement on just labor type of issues. It's been in the news multiple times every year the last couple of years on these big operators getting busted for having minors or sharp stuff. So clearly, a lot of the big players, JBS, for instance, with the problems they have a, let's just say, a lack of ethics about abiding by regulatory oversight already. If all of that's pulled back, what kind of shenanigans are they going to get into? And is this regulatory rollback going to benefit small farmers who are accessing the direct to retail space at all? Is this something that the administration has shown itself in the past to be very oriented towards big businesses, not so much smaller businesses, like small farms, small butcher shops? So is that going to have a negative effect on us? So those are the things that that I'm watching. Two big areas that I think really need reform in the USDA is regulatory oversight, and not so much that we need less regulations. They certainly need an overhaul and adjustments, but we need regulation enforcement, actually, antitrust enforcement on the consolidation that these biggest companies have over food production and meat processing in the United States. That bottlenecking effect that chokes access to a economical market outlet. I was talking in a workshop I did yesterday that it costs them 20, $25 to process a pig. It's costing us $500 or $600. Someone like JBS or National Beef, it's costing them well under $100 to process a beef. It's costing us $1,100 to process beef. Those are the kind of issues that I'm looking at is regulatory reform. We need regulations that make sense for small producers, for big producers that have quality assurance built in to that process in ways that we can operate profitably under and that they can be held to a standard underneath. The other side of that would be subsidy reform. We have to do something about the hundreds of billions of dollars that are going out in SNAP that is subsidizing first and foremost a sugar industry, which is unhealthy, obviously. Part of that whole Make America Healthy type of movement that's going on. Corn being subsidized from both the production side and the consumption side. There needs to be subsidy reform. My personal opinion is that really needs to be moved over to HHS and not be an agricultural department thing. But another video for there. So we've already gone like over 15 minutes. I know I said these ones would be like 3 to 5 minutes, but just that brief, not so brief go over of the new administration that's coming in, the new Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, and what she might be bringing to the department, what the administration's posture is going to be. We don't know yet. We can just put together pieces of what the past has been and use that as a tool to look into the future. So in one of the next couple of videos, though, I want to kind of dive into the topic of building a farm business that is insulated from the effects of Washington. I think that's really the route that we need to go as small farms is figure out how we can build our businesses in such a way that whatever they do to the plus or minus up there, we are insulated from that as much as we possibly can. So we'll wrap that up for today. Probably post a video, walking around the trade show here, try to get some interviews with some folks. There's a lot of cool people here at this conference. I'll see if I can corral them into a corner and get little interviews with them. If you got any questions, definitely put them in the comments. We'll address them in a future video. But appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time. Later.